What's up, everybody? How we doing? What's going on, everyone? Happy, what is it? Monday, September 30th, the last day of September today. And then we move into October. Thanks for joining me, everyone, on this YouTube Live. I appreciate all you guys' presence. If you're here, I would love to hear where you're coming in from. Where are you tuning in from? Where in the world are you coming from? If you're watching this live, let me know where in the world you're watching. Again, I eventually want to be able to have these to be able to be really, really interactive with people. Once we build these up more and more, we're going to have more interaction on these live videos with more people sort of tuning in. So that's eventually where we're going to get to, guys, is that we're going to have more interaction, more live interaction. Is the sun? I have to move it a little bit like that. But yeah, so eventually we're going to have these be, my hope is that we're going to have these be really, really sort of interactive and a place where people can sort of ask questions, a place where people can interact, a place where people can connect. And so that's eventually where we're going to go with these lives. And if you guys haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. That way you can get updates when new content is live. Right now, we're kind of in a schedule where Mondays at this time, 12 Pacific, I'm going live. Wednesdays, I have a new educational video that drops. And Fridays at 12 Pacific, we're doing a live just like this. In a few months, I have a podcast that's going to be coming live, which is going to have a like regular podcast component to it. But then it's, that's going to be on all Apple Podcasts. But then it's also going to have a video component that's going to be here on YouTube. So every single podcast will also be recorded in video. And when that is the case and that goes live, I'm probably going to drop it down to probably one live. So it'll be basically one podcast and one live a week. And that will be a little bit later this year. So, all right, guys, if you're watching this live, let me know where you guys are tuning in from. Let me know what's happened, everybody. Let me know how you guys are doing. I guess one thing is just first off, just hopefully everybody is doing okay with this crazy, crazy energy that we're dealing with. There is some really, really wild energy that's out in the space right now. Robin, yes, Hudson Valley, New York. Thanks so much, Robin, for always being on these. I appreciate your presence here. Never been to the Hudson Valley, but I hope that I can go one day. I know it's not far from New York City. I've only ever been to New York City actually twice in my life. Once when I was really, really young, and then once about 10 years ago. I fucking love New York. I love going to watch the Comedy Cellar, like just cruising to like all the stand-up comedy. That's one of my favorite things to do there. And like see shows and just the entertainment in that city is incredible. But yeah, guys, first off, just with this energy that we're experiencing right now, I don't know how you guys are feeling, but it basically feels like its own microcosm of an initiation. So since my real big like initiation began, basically the past month has been, since I got out of the acute phase of my initiation, the past month has been the most acute experience and uncomfortable experience that I've had in my body since coming out of my acute initiation. I probably came out of my acute initiation probably a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years. Yes, Robin. So I'm having a bunch of GI stuff this week. Like my system can't digest everything that is coming up. 100%. The biggest thing I would say, and for the purpose of this live, I'm going to be talking about Ascension. I'm going to be talking just about Ascension symptoms, the path of embodied spiritual initiation, then also just what the energy is like right now and kind of talk a little bit more about what's coming up with the energy. And that's why I thought this topic would be so prevalent now, because if we are someone whose bodies are sort of locked into this process, we're going to be experiencing things really acutely right now. And Robin, I'm the same way. Like my stomach is ballooning, like stomach just balloons. You know what I mean? And so it's 100% that our bodies can't hold all the energy we're accessing right now. So the reason why shit's so uncomfortable right now is because we're being inundated with all this energy and our bodies are not able to hold it. right? And that's basically what happens when we go through an embodied spiritual initiation, or our bodies sort of clue into this process. What it basically means is that our bodies are accessing more energy than we're capable of holding. So when we go through a spiritual initiation, like in a very embodied one, it's such a physical process, because essentially what's happening is you're accessing more energetic capacity sort of in the spiritual sort of realm, but you don't have the capacity in your earthly cellular nervous system body to hold the energy yet. That's what creates the initiation, is the process of how do I slowly learn to build more capacity to hold more and more of this energy. So it's kind of like we're beginning to access our potential, our energetic potential, but the physical human body doesn't have the capacity to hold the full energetic volume of what's going on. And right now, what's happened is we've had this massive, very acute energetic dump that has created its own sort of microcosm of an initiation where our bodies are like, fuck, this is way too much, which my friend Adriana, she calls it like the traffic jam. So right now we're in like a big energetic traffic jam. And what this means is we're going to be physically feeling all sorts of shit. Like, physically, I've felt pretty gnarly recently. The biggest symptom being just total exhaustion, fatigue, kind of in and out of like a depressive state, not being motivated, feeling really sort of like blah, feeling heavy, feeling dense, with little brief pockets of euphoria, of real regulation, of real powerful energy. But mostly 90%, it's been just pretty consistently dark with a few sort of pockets. And that's because our bodies are accessing so much energy. And so when I talk a lot, like on my Instagram, about what sort of this new realm of spirituality is, what I really see it as, it's just a very embodied realm of spirituality, where it's not predicated on things like, how much plant medicine you've done, how many tarot cards you've pulled. Well, all these things can be things that can assist the process. They're not necessary. They're kind of additive, right? That's how I see sort of spiritual practice as kind of like an additive thing. It's not mandatory, because what happens, and this is the way I see it, when you've done enough embodiment work on yourself, meaning, you've worked with somatic therapists, you've worked with coaches who work in the body, you've done enough breath work, you've done enough body work, you've done enough healing in your body. And here's the other part, that you're called, right? So when I say called, like this sort of process, it's not something you can really sort of seek out. It's something that just kind of happens. So people always ask me, like, how do I get into this energetics of God, Jamie? And it's the truth is, it's kind of something that you're called into, or you're not. And a lot of factors that will contribute to that is how sensitive your system is, right? So usually people that are called into this process, where it's a really physical process, it means they have a hyper sensitive bodies. They're acutely body sensitive. So for example, with all this energy that's going on, you're more likely to feel something the more sensitive your body is. Like, I even have friends that aren't in this space, but are they're not in this space, but they're really sensitive, like soulful beings, and they're really feeling it physically. Then I have other friends who aren't body sensitive, aren't in this space, and have no idea what's going on, right? So the big thing with who's called to this very physical spiritual process, how sensitive is your body? And I've talked about this before, but how old is your soul? So usually you're really body sensitive. Means you're just an acutely, deeply sensitive person who has a lot of attunement with energy. So people who are really going to be tapped into this process are people that are very sensitive in their bodies. Means they often feel things very physically. They feel emotions and energy very, very physically. And they have a really old soul. Means their soul has been here for a long time. Their soul's been here long before their physical body was. And they have a really sort of nuance attunement for energy, right? If we're really able to feel energetic subtleties and nuances, we're probably going to kind of clue into this process. And so we have an old soul, we're body sensitive, we have a real kind of innate capacity for energy. Let's say we have a lot of raw talent with energy, to access energy, to move energy, to be attuned to energy. So all those pieces combined with, we start doing enough work on ourselves that our body starts to clue into this process. Our body starts to clue into this process. And basically just what is happening is our body is actually beginning to reorient sort of with the cosmos. Our body's beginning to reorient with this innate divine intelligence. I always see it that, like, when we go through an embodied spiritual initiation, we're not becoming something, but we're unraveling, unwinding, and we're bearing up who we always have been, but we weren't able to be. So it's like a peeling back process. So we're peeling back layers and layers and layers of trauma and karma and density and wounding and fear and stored survival trauma in the nervous system. We're peeling back until eventually we're trying to get to the most like authentic, vibrant expression of our soul spirit. And so this process of constantly what's happening, it's this unwinding and bearing and digging up process of allowing the true innate divine intelligence of our body's natural orientation to God and the divine to come forward. And so once you clue into this process, once your body does, you typically don't really have to do anything. Your body's going to now move. And what this means is you're going to feel the energetics and what's happening around you. You know, you're going to feel the eclipses. You're going to feel the new moons. You're going to feel the solar flares. You're going to feel these shifts on Earth so much more, because when your body reorients to like a natural state of divinity, what's actually happening is this reorienting to the energetic and universal flow at a higher spectrum, right? At a higher spectrum. This is why when your body keys into this process, when we're in this portal right now, you feel it so much. There's no separation, right? There's no separation. So when people don't feel what's happening right now, it means that there's so many layers of density in their body that there's too much separation between them and the energy that's happening. But when you're an old soul who's body sensitive, who has begun to do enough work where your body's like, oh, okay, we're going to tap into this intelligence, right? So when all those things happen, your body gets a message. Oh, we're going to tap into this intelligence. Or spirit and God is like, oh, Jamie is getting to a point where he's ready to be initiated into this process. And so we're an old soul who's really body sensitive, who's really attuned to energy, who goes down a spiritual path far enough and does enough work on ourselves that we're able to be initiated into this place. And I call this place, it's a paradigm. It's a whole new paradigm. And essentially what we're having to do is we're having to learn a completely new way of moving. We're having to learn a new way of moving through the world. And so when we go through this process, things are never going to be the same again. Things are never going to be the same again. And we're having to learn what this new process and space is. We're having to completely learn what this new paradigm is. Like when I was going through my initiation, parts of me, aspects of me kept wanting to go kind of back to the way that things were, or kept, wanting to put, one foot, one leg back in the old place. And that just kept continuing to make things more difficult. So you're moving into a new paradigm. And so essentially you're having to learn a whole completely new way of relating in the world. You're having to learn a whole new way of relating in the world. And so we're being initiated into a brand new paradigm. And really what this is that our physical bodies are being brought on this magic carpet ride. That's kind of like really what it is. that our bodies are being brought on this magic carpet ride because our body is trying to remember its innate divine intelligence. And our body is trying to dig up this innate divine intelligence, which means we're going to continue to access more and more energy, more and more higher cosmos, higher constellations of energy that our body is going to have to now try and digest into the earthly body. So we've basically sort of in our life opened up a portal. We've basically opened up a portal, and there's a whole new way of moving and working in the world. And when I talk a lot about, if you guys have seen, and I see you guys comments, which I will get to, don't worry. You've seen me talk a lot on Instagram, the new spiritual paradigm. What I really talk about is our bodies are aligning and locking into this process, right? And so it's basically this process of divine embodiment. It's basically a process of divine embodiment where your body and vessel is trying to become a divine vessel, a divine being, where you're trying to align with your body's ultimate highest ascension of vibration. And you have to clear so much stuff. You have to clear all your past life energy, all the energy of your ancestors, all your own stuff. You also continue to access just more energy just from the earth and the universe at large. And it's going to continue to grow. Basically, what happens is you integrate some of this energy for a while, then the universe is, okay, here's more. You integrate some of this energy for a while, and the universe is like, here's more. And so this is the amazing part and the really challenging aspect. The amazing part is that you're going to be able to grow and transform at a rapid rate. You're going to be able to jump timelines so quickly. You're someone who's here to move. You're someone who's been chosen to move into your greatest possible potential in this lifetime. That God spirit is like, you're going to move into your greatest possible potential in this lifetime. And what's happening is you're accessing the energy that is equivalent with what you're here to do. And then your very physical process is having to integrate all this energy to hold the capacity. So this is why I talk a lot about it's kind of the convergence of divinity and humanity. You know how for so long, you guys, and I'm going to get into your guys' questions and some of the symptoms here soon. But you know, when you see so many people online and they're talking about, okay, we have like the spiritual industry, then we have polarity, then we have sort of conscious relationship, we have psychology. It's kind of like different sectors, right? And people who are kind of more psychology based kind of see spirituality as this kind of separate compartmentalized thing. And so basically this process that I'm talking about, it combines every single sector together in one. It combines psychology, it combines energy work, it combines nervous system healing, it combines like past life retrieval, soul retrieval, it combines polarity, it combines ancestral healing. So this process of the new spiritual paradigm is basically all the sectors are merging into your body. And they're all coming together as one thing. There's no separation because they're all infused of the process, right? So what that means is you're having to retrieve aspects of your soul and you're having to digest it through your body, and you're having to learn to regulate and enhance the capacity of your nervous system to hold more energy. You're accessing ancestral energy and past life energy. So you're having to learn how ancestral energy works in the body. You're having to learn how to move energy in your body. You're having to deal with polarity as well, the polarity of your ancestors. So we're dealing with everything. And this is why I say this process is going to threaten different sort of industries that have really sort of compartmentalized different aspects. Whereas people who are very pragmatic are like, oh, that's like woo-woo, that's like spirituality, that's like ungrounded, the men are in their feminine, all these sort of things, right? And then people who are really spiritual will be like, oh, like, you know, that's just something else. Like that person's not spiritual. That person doesn't have a spiritual practice. So they'll conveniently want to create this separation because it's threatening the paradigm of how they understand things to be. It's threatening the paradigm of how they understand things to be. And so when all these pieces come together, it's basically creating this new paradigm where this process of spirituality, it basically expands beyond spirituality because it's so physically in your body. Your body's just aligned to your process. And so the new spiritual paradigm is like a physical experience of God. It's a physical, in your body, in the earth experience of God, where your body kind of aligns to this paradigm of the higher cosmos and higher constellations, which continues to create energetic access and energetic digestion so that you could expand your divinity, right? And so now as we move into a little bit of, okay, so this process is very physical. What basically happens, you guys, is, for example, at a very low grade, like say you're at the very beginning of tapping into this process in the body, what you might just feel is just a lot of exhaustion. You don't really feel much else, but you just feel a lot of exhaustion. And so the way that I break this down is that if you just feel a lot of exhaustion and that's about it, nothing else in your body, basically what's happening is the energy stuck here. The energy stuck here, it's not able to move, right? So think about it right now. Like right now, and this is how I kind of see periods like eclipses. Again, I'm not someone who's like well informed in these pieces, so I look at it very simply. But like when different things are happening, right, in sort of the energetic space and the universal space, I basically say that the veil between the human realm and the spirit realm is extra thin, or there isn't even a veil, that it's a complete convergence with the spirit realm and the earthly realm. And in these massive portals, we kind of go in and out of these portals. There's times where the veil's a little bit thicker, so our bodies are a little bit more protected. Then there's times where that veil sort of disintegrates a little bit. There's a complete convergence, and then that's where our bodies get ambushed by the energy. And so when we get ambushed by this energy, it's an energetic traffic jam, right? And when you go through a spiritual initiation, basically the gist of it is that you're accessing energy that your body can't handle or hold yet. That's what happens when I talk about spiritual initiation. Your body's accessing higher frequency energy that your body can't manage yet. That's why we move into a space of disease or chronic illness, or a space of injury, or ascension sickness, ascension symptoms, all these different things, because we're accessing something that our body can't hold, right? And so at the very first level, energy's up here and we're exhausted. Oh, I'm so tired, I can't get out of bed. What this really means, and what I will say, guys, is the energy that we're accessing is going to be, it's going to be basically a bit of everything. Past life, ancestral energy, our own stuff, and just collective energy that has an impersonal relationship to us. Right now, we're accessing all of those things combined. So we might feel this is partly our stuff, then we might feel this, and we 100% know it's ancestral stuff, and then we're like, this isn't even stuff that has to do with me. It's just energy that's hitting me. So it's a bit of everything that we're going to be experiencing. But so we're exhausted. What that means is the crown is not open enough to receive any of the energy. So energy wants to either go down or move up. So I see energy moving down as a integration, whereas energy moving up as a merging. So when I say energy moving down, is there's something that's trying to be digested in the body to expand our foundation, our capacity, our energetic field. When energy is wanting to move up, it means that our chakras and energy centers are wanting to merge and align with each other at a greater level. So for example, when we're shooting energy out our crown, that's basically like this alignment process where the chakras are trying to counterbalance together. This is how I view it, at least. Other people might have different opinions about that, but that's how I view it. And so right now, if we're only just exhausted, that means the energy has nowhere to go. The crown's not open enough, right? So if we're just so exhausted, and so that's why some people at a time like right now, the only symptom they're experiencing is, I've been really tired recently, right? Just what that means is that the energy has hit the field, but it can't come into the body yet. The energy has hit the field, but it can't come into the body yet, right? And so what the energy is waiting for, what God and the divine is looking for, is that point when the crown chakra is open enough that you can receive the energy. The crown chakra is open enough that the energy can come down, that the energy can enter your body, right? And so if we're just exhausted, but I haven't really noticed anything else, then the energy's swirling, right? So think about it right now. It's like at a time like this, we're in a portal. The veil between the human realm and the spirit realm is either completely disintegrated or it's very thin. It's like a pressure down here. It's like pressure coming down here, right? And so the process of what wants to happen is the energy wants to enter the crown and digest through every single center in the body to move out our hands, our sacrum, or our feet, to expand the nervous system, our energetic capacity, and our capacity to hold more, right? So the more this energy comes through the crown, moves and exits out our hands, our sacrum, and our feet, the more we're bringing heaven to earth, the divine to the human realm. We're bringing our full capacity to hold our spiritual gifts, to hear down through our body, right? And so what happens, though, is we get inundated with so much energy that there's so many traffic jams in our body, right? So many traffic jams in our body. And so even just to let you guys know what I've noticed a lot with this energy, it's basically been a full body transmission. So it's basically like I've noticed things everywhere. I've noticed a lot in the chest, a lot of really heavy chest. I've noticed so much in my head and my face and my eyes, so much in my stomach, like digestive issues, nausea, burning stomach, super heavy chest, hot and cold, so much congestion in my head, burning in the eyes, headaches, pressure at the top of my head, times when I can't feel my body properly, times when a lot of like full body twitching and releasing. And as I've clued in, like what it feels like is again, it's kind of like the funnel for energy to move through is not wide enough to hold the full energy that we're accessing, right? So right now the funnel is too big. That's why, like when I went through my initiation, I had so much compression in my spine because I was accessing so much ancestral energy that my central nervous system could not hold it at the time. So the response with the energy that I had accessed was to move into such a bracing that created this compression in all the discs in my spine, because my body was like hit so hard and it needed like 2 years to unwind that energy in order to actually learn how to move it through. And so that's what happens in initiation, you guys. You're accessing more energy than your body learns how to hold. I'm having massive asthma attacks, Nidu. Yes, so 100%. Like we are definitely accessing some crazy generational grief right now. Crazy generational anguish, crazy generational tear. I've had so much stuff related to like heavy chest, a bit in the throat, but it's mostly been the head, the face, the stomach, and the chest. Those have been like the most common areas right now. And so I'll even just talk about like what are some symptoms. Okay, so some Ascension symptoms: pressure in the top of our head, right? Headaches, tingling on the top of our head, feeling like someone's pressing down on us. That's very much going to be associated with we're accessing energy in the spirit realm or the ancestral realm that our body's not able to digest. So we have a headache, we have pressure at the top of our head, we have tingling. Tingling's obviously a little more comfortable than the other ones, but I've had a lot of headaches. And that's how I know the energy that's like coming down, my body's like it's too much. It's too much. And so that's why right now is so challenging, guys, because we're getting dumped. Like imagine like a blizzard that just like totally fucks over a town that's not prepared. That's what's happening at an energetic level right now. Robin, this morning I was doing some voice body energy work for the stomach stuff. I was working to open a spot and started coughing and gagging and heaving. Yes. And if you think about the energy in the stomach, right? Well, here, let me continue. I'm just going to talk a little more about some of the symptoms. I'm just going to list them off, and then I might get into a little bit of more specific meanings. Earaches, ear infections, eye infections, pulsing in your eyes, burning in your eyes, twitching in your eyes, numbness in your face, numbness in one of your sides of your face. For a while during my initiation, I had partial paralysis in one side of my face. Tooth pain, tooth sensitivity, burning throat, your throat is on fire, itchy face, but pressing down in your shoulders. Think about when pressing down in your shoulders is kind of like you're taking on the weight of the world. Like think about a lot of the times when someone's like, I have chronic heavy shoulders. What it means is that we're holding a burden. Often means we're holding a generational burden. So if someone has a symptom of a lot of heaviness on their shoulders, I know they're probably holding a lot of emotion and energy that's not theirs. So when we have really heavy shoulders, that's people who like to overfunction, people who like to be overly empathetic and lack boundaries will take on other people's stuff. That's heavy shoulders. Ancestral energy wants to camp out at the neck, the scapula, the spine, and the lower back. Those are the main ways. So I can tell very, very quickly when I'm dealing with generational energy. Pain in the scapula is one of the most common ways. Sharp pain in the spine. When someone's arm goes numb, it's generational ancestral energy. When someone's arm goes cold. You guys, typically when we work in energy, cold is fear, heat is soul. It's not always, but this is the baseline that I try to orient from when I work with people. So when someone's gets really cold, what it means is we're dealing with deep, deep generational fear. When someone gets warm, it's a bit of the body trying to reclaim some vibrancy of the soul, right? But also just a common ascension symptom, and this is separate from heat being soul, cold being fear. Hot and cold is our body trying to find homeostasis, but we can't. So that's, hot and cold is another ascension symptom. Ballooning in your stomach, bloating, stomach parasites, candida in the stomach, hormone imbalance, thyroid impact, increase in cortisol levels, tons and tons of inflammation. So a big thing with me is I gained a lot of weight during my initiation, and no matter what I do, it doesn't decrease it. And the reason being, and I've looked into this a lot and seen a lot of people, is because my body's constantly accessing so much energy that it keeps spiking cortisol and keeps spiking inflammation in my body. And so I kind of just don't have a choice right now because my body's learning how to hold this, which it can't kind of find a homeostasis because it keeps accessing more and more. So an increase. So going through initiation, we could lose a lot of weight or gain a lot of weight, depending on how our body responds, because we could get a lot, what's the word? A lot puffier, right? Increase in inflammation, hip pain. Let's see, what else do we got? A lot of pain in your tailbone, a lot of burning in your asshole, knee issues, cramping in your legs. So you guys, and that's just some of them, guys, back issues, disc issues, nerve irritation, all these different things. These are just some of the symptoms that we're experiencing, because what's happening is we're basically experiencing a transformational process at a physical level. That's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the transformational process at a physical level because our body is trying to reorient and realign to the higher cosmos and constellations, and we're trying to learn how to hold this energy in a way in our system. And that's the process that we're dealing with. been feeling close to puking since then? Yes, 100%. So when we think about the stomach, you guys, like, for one, always when we're dealing with the stomach, I always think when someone's holding in the stomach, basically think about, okay, we're holding in the stomach. What that really is, okay, think about where that energy is wanting to go. The holding the stomach, it's wanting to now merge with the cock or the womb. It's wanting to merge with the sacred life force center, right? So when the energy really, really gets to the womb and the cock, now it kind of merges with the sacred life force energy. But what is so I call the stomach the passage of fear, right? I call the solar plexus and the stomach the passage of fear. Kind of like, think of like, a boat that's got to cross a channel and cross a passage. That's what I see the stomach and the solar plexus. So when the energy comes to your stomach and your solar plexus, it wants to move with your sacred life force center, but it is processing a certain level of terror and anguish and fear. So when we're dealing with the stomach, we're dealing with fear. But when we're dealing with energy in the stomach related to generational energy, it's not just fear, it's absolute terror and it's anguish. It moves beyond, right? And so that energy is wanting to and like what I've been experiencing the past month, my stomach will balloon, it'll process, get really, really skinny, and then I'll access again, and then it will balloon again. It will get really, really energy will come, it will integrate, I'll feel really light in that area, and then more energy comes and we balloon again. And it's happening at a faster pace than normal. I usually go through this fluctuation, but not as rapid as the pace that's been happening the last month. And so that energy in your stomach is generational terror and anguish that is wanting to be transmuted into the creation of your sacred life force energy. So your stomach, the ballooning in your stomach, it's wanting to merge down. And what happens is what we're trying to move to is a place. And so much of nervous system regulation or dysregulation is going to do with what's happening in the gut, what's happening in the stomach. If our stomach's ballooning, it means cortisol spiking. Cortisol stomach is a really common thing in Ascension, where it's just constant pumping of cortisol, fear, injection of fear, stomach balloons, which moves the nervous system into dysregulation, which increases inflammation in the body. And this process keeps happening. And, but when it lets go, your nervous system is trying to reorient at a new level of regulation while processing a really big generational trauma piece. So when that ballooning in that stomach begins to move down, essentially you're moving something, some level of anguish that I'm literally going to say has been in your family lineage for somewhere in the past 300 years. Sometime in that time frame, you're moving that through your stomach. And so right now, the ballooning and the releasing is generational anguish being pumped through the system, which is like, I can tell I have more inflammation in my body right now, and that's because of the constant spike in cortisol. And the way that really, really happens is the gut. The gut is kind of like the center point for this, which transmutes energy all over the place. So when we have a lot of inflammation in our gut, it's going to bleed to everywhere else, which is going to lead to us oftentimes becoming puffier, holding more weight, which is a process that's always happening to me, irregardless of how dialed in I am with anything. And so, you guys, basically what is happening is the energy is trying to merge in our lower chakras. When I say lower chakras, we say the root and the sacral. And so the more energy merges into the more our root opens, the more that our crown is going to access more energy. So this process is always proportional to how much energy is integrated into the earth. Like, when you meet a really pragmatic person who doesn't believe in the divine, here's the thing that I'm going to tell you guys is, if our crown's not open, neither is our root. And if our root's not open, neither is our crown. When both the root and the crown, so for example, when the root is actually open, the crown will just begin to open eventually, right? And so when you talk about people who maybe feel more of the earth, they feel really grounded. If they were actually truly grounded, meaning when I say grounded, they've actually dealt with layers of their deepest core root trauma and that of their ancestors, their root would open, which would facilitate emerging with all the other energy centers in our body. This is like the natural vibration and rhythm our bodies are wanting to move into. So when someone feels really pragmatic, they're really disconnected to the crown, right? Then what they're essentially saying, and no matter what they tell you, they haven't actually opened up their root. They haven't actually opened up their root. Because if they had opened up their root, the crown would begin to get the message. Oh, right? But it takes us like having to meet our deepest core root trauma and just beginning to integrate that deepest core root trauma in the body. My lungs are massively triggered by histamines right now. Yep. Like a sharpshooter in forest fire inflammation. It's insane. Yeah. Like this. I really think the biggest emotions that we're dealing with right now is fear, which, what are parallels of fear? Anguish, terror, helplessness, unworthiness, and grief. So I think grief and fear and different offshoots in grief and fear, I think those are the two biggest emotions that we're dealing. And think about grief and fear are probably like the two worst, right? They're probably the two worst. Those are the ones, fear and grief, I feel like is what we're dealing with the most right now. If the root, is it like grounded versus collapse? If the root is open, there is grounding. If the root is closed and someone feels earthly, it's more collapse. Yeah, like I wouldn't say they're like shut down in their system, but they haven't gone into the core root, right? And maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe they're not supposed to. And for example, say someone's really afraid of their crown. If someone's really afraid of their crown, let's say people that are really have a spiritual capacity and maybe have tapped into their crown, and the reason why you're afraid of your crown is because the root's not open enough, right? So what happens when people try to open their crown too much without the root, you get terrified of it because your body doesn't have the capacity to hold, which is why this process that I'm talking about is your body and process is keying into a process that it becomes very holistic for your body, meaning your body's not going to access anything it's not able to hold. This is why, like, for example, say someone does ayahuasca before they're ready. If we don't have the nervous system capacity to hold it, when you go to ayahuasca, essentially what's happening is your crown is getting blown open. You're going to access a whole new level of energy. So when you go to ayahuasca or plant medicine, you're accessing such a deep revelation of the unconscious, and you might not be ready to hold it. If you're able to do those things holistically and know what you have the capacity to hold, it can be wonderful. But if you do it before you're ready, what happens is you're having a level of the unconscious revealed and a level of the crown being blown open that the root can't hold. This is where people go into can go into things like psychosis. This is where people can go into like a trauma spiral or a really dark place for a couple of years, or go down a really dark path because their body's not holistically accessing something. They're forcing it, right? They're forcing it. And so if we're afraid of our crown opening, it means that the root's not fully open. And if you see people who they seem really, really grounded, really of the earth, but they feel like they have no connection to their crown, no real connection to their higher chakras, their root is not actually open. So think of really, really seemingly grounded, like men's teachers, right? If they're not in some way connected to the divine and God, and it means their root is not actually open. And what it probably means is that their earth connection and their root connection, their lower chakras, not necessarily became a trauma response, but they learned at some point to create that as their default, that they had to make it as their default. For example, maybe that person experimented with some spiritual stuff and was like, ooh, like this is so up here. I'm going to default so deeply back into the earth. And so what I'm saying is there's some type of default response that's happening in someone, because when your root truly opens, it facilitates a process where, oh, think about it. Like they could make like a kid's cartoon about your chakras opening. Like when the root opens and, you know, the root's like, ooh, like this really like deep voice kind of curmudgeon Jew or something like that. And it sends a message for the other chakras, like we can begin to open, you know, and it's like the root's opening, the sacral can open, the sacral opens, now the solar plexus can open, and it spirals upwards. And then eventually it becomes a point where all these all the energy centers are able to like harmonize with each other. Think of like all the chakras and energy centers as like a choir, or like, you know, like a band who can all harmonize together. They all have different ranges and different octaves. You know, you think the you know, higher chakras of the higher range and the deeper bass tones and treble tones are down in the lower chakras, and we need all of them. And that is basically our natural divinity, which is why this process I talk about, guys, is basically the convergence of everything coming together: psychology, conscious relationship, spirituality, polarity, family systems, ancestral energy, past life soul retrieval, astrology, you know, nervous system healing. It's all of these pieces coming together. And it's trying to create like a new paradigm, which is basically just spirituality is a very physical process, right? And if you're feeling all these symptoms right now, it means your body is clued into this process in some regard. And basically anyone that comes to work with me for a significant period of time, at some level, their body clues into this process at some level. And that's why, like, when you talk about this process, if people aren't having a physical experience with it, they won't understand it. You won't understand this until you begin to have a physical experience of it. And then you're like, holy shit, you begin to get it. And what's essentially happening is your body's beginning to, and again, I think this is really threatening because it's putting the power back into the people, that you can be your own divine creator, that things don't have to look a certain way, that you're beginning to understand what your process is for you. Like what process am I engaging in for the unique vibration of my soul and spirit to live out in the world, to expand out and to live my purpose of what I'm here to do in this lifetime. And so it's very much like it's taking the power out of the institution, it's taking the power out of the deity and bringing the power back to the people. Who are you as a sovereign individual who can be the conductor and the creator of your own energy without needing to outsource it to some guru or some teacher or some spiritual leader? This is like the anti-cult cult is the way I kind of see it, because it's bringing the power back to the people and allowing your body to engage in a process. And I believe that this embodied spiritual initiation is the next wave of consciousness that we're moving into. And I think it's only more and more people are going to begin to feel these physical symptoms. And I believe this process really became accelerated during the pandemic. It was like, oh, whew. Like that's when it really, really became accelerated, even if it had been beginning before that. But this is where human consciousness is really trying to, and like, for example, people who are some people, like someone like Joe Dispenza would have been someone who, he wouldn't have framed it under this, but he's someone who is talking about some iteration of what I'm talking about here, because he went through a very physical experience where he learned how to heal himself. I went through a similar thing where I had to learn how to heal myself in my own body, which that's why this process is so much to do with illness and injury, because illness and injury, this process of spiritual initiation, spiritual embodiment, is so much a visceral, physical experience in your body. And really what's happening is your body's trying to learn how to hold its full energetic potential and capacity. And the reason why the initiation forms, the illness, the injury, the ascension sickness, the difficulty in your body, is because your body's accessing more energy than it's capable of holding right now. And so we're essentially, guys, we're dealing with traffic congestion. Right now, we're dealing with traffic congestion in the body. and our body's doing its best to be able to work through what's happening. And what's going to happen is it's going to be a big timeline shift when we eventually move out of this. At some point, the veil won't be so acute. It will let up a little bit, give our bodies a bit more of a break. I don't know when that's going to be. And then will allow us to really integrate and digest the energy that's coming down. Because I basically feel like I'm in a full body transmission every day, where it's like every single center of my body is trying to work with the energy. It's trying to deal with the energy, trying to figure out what to do with it, trying to find its place. And the only problem is right now is like you integrate a bit of the energy, then you get dumped again, so you don't really get a break. So that's why it's exhausting. Robin, if the root is open, there is grounding. If the root is closed and someone feels earthly, it's more collapse. Yes, like in a basic sense, that's exactly it. It's kind of like not necessarily a trauma response, but it's like a default mechanism. It's a default mechanism. It's like think about the body that we come into the world with. And I'm not talking about our innate divine intelligence, but I'm talking about like a learned response. So being really in the earth becomes more of a learned response, becomes much more of a learned response. And that's why you see very pragmatic teachers who you would think, oh, they're so connected to their root. And I'm like, well, if they were connected to their root, they'd also be connected to their crown. You can't be connected to one and not the other. So if your root's actually open, what's really going to happen is your body's going to begin to move into a and this is where I think you're like, people are like, oh, they're so grounded. It's actually, we need to reframe that. And it's like, okay, well, if that person's like anti-spirituality or doesn't believe in magic at all, and is like, oh, like that's woo, the person's root is not open. They're living in some default mechanism, not necessarily a trauma response. I'm not going to go that far, but their body's in like, so what would be a default mechanism would be, for example, it could relate to the role that we learn to play in the family home, right? Say we're someone who always had to be the one to like hold space for other people. We had to grow up really quickly. We had to be a parent when we were a child. What that's going to do is going to lead to a default response where we have to be really here. We have to be really of the earth. We have to be really responsible, right? And so now the default mechanism is going to be really in the earth. Because if we all of a sudden begin to access the crown, it feels like we're going to die, because the imprint of the body was that I had to be here to hold the fort down. And if I leave, there's no one there anymore. There's no one to hold me, right? And so that could be an example. You guys have a default mechanism. It could relate to the what the fuck's the term I used to call it? The survival family identity, the identity we use to survive in our family. Yeah, it's fake grounding. It's totally right. It's control. It's actually like a fear of surrender and letting go. It's a fear. So when someone's in like fake grounding, or what it means is they actually know there could be more, but they're afraid of some aspect of themselves, or they're afraid of that aspect they see in other people, right? So it could be someone that's really controlled and is afraid to like become unhinged in their power. Someone who's really afraid to let go. And so they're like, we keep everything here. We keep everything so of the earth as a way to deal that with, we can't surrender and let go in a certain way, or we're afraid of our power in a certain way. We're afraid of what would happen if we really, really accessed our power. And we see that in other people, and we're like, oh, like this person's not grounded. I remember I saw a post. I forget who it was, but it was some men's teacher talking. And I could feel the compartmentalization they had between being grounded in spirituality. And so they associate that spirituality can't be grounded, and that you almost have to be not spiritual to be grounded. And that compartmentalization is what it's going to do. It's going to create a controlled response in the root, meaning they're not actually going to be in the root, but they're going to use that as a default coping mechanism. And they have a real compartmentalization. maybe they had an experience where they did plant medicine and they're like, oh shit, or they had a poor association of what it meant to be in your spiritual power. Because and so this new version of spirituality is so embodied that it threatens both those spheres, the pragmatic sphere and the ungrounded spiritual community who operates in ego, and the pragmatic crowd whose psychology, polarity, conscious relationship, but is afraid of the magic and considers everything talking about this dimension, that, as woo-woo and like ungrounded. And so this convergence is going to fuck up both those realms because it's shattering their paradigm. And so, for example, the shit I'm talking about, someone who is ego spirituality would be like, that dude's not spiritual. Like, that dude's like so out of integrity in his spirituality. That's probably what they would say. Someone who is very pragmatic and rigid would probably say, oh, that dude's like in his feminine, or that dude is so woo-woo, or he's ungrounded, or that's airy-fairy, or that's woo-woo, right? But what I'm talking about is the complete merging of all of it together, that you bring it down, and it threatens both those sides. That's why I talk about it threatens the overly pragmatic. Think about the crowd, which is like, that's what it threatens people like therapists, counselors, people who are so of the earth. Those people are so of the earth, like, are they in the root, or are they in like a default mechanism control of the root because they're afraid of the crown? They're afraid of that, right? And the spiritual community, the ungrounded spiritual community, is so much in higher vibration, and they're all about here without really dealing with the root, right? So the ungrounded spiritual community will do everything but deal with their deepest core root trauma of their life and the ancestors. They'll do every single work on themselves except with the most important work they should be doing. The ungrounded spiritual community will do everything, all this work on themselves, but it will kind of be this, they'll kind of dance around the subject. Because when you deal with your trauma, you don't have to do any of that non-essential shit. When you actually deal with your trauma and you're someone who is being called by God in this way and you are being anointed, if you just deal with your trauma, that's all you have to do. If you just deal with your trauma, this is all you have to do. And I had been floating around. I have 3 different sort of book ideas that I was sort of playing with. And I've kind of been writing them all a little bit. And I'm pretty certain which one I know I need to write now, which is basically talking about this whole process and this space and this sort of new paradigm of spirituality, which I think will help so many of us who have these physical experiences, these physical symptoms that are merging with like illness, mental illness, physical injury. And we're trying to attach to something like, I think as human beings, we want to like attach to labels and different things because it allows us to feel safe, right? And that's so much of what like the ungrounded spiritual community does is they kind of fleed their stuff and they attach to sort of this paradigm. They attach this paradigm because they need to. But what we're talking about here is this wholeness and sovereignty of that you become your own church. You become your own shrine. You become your own cathedral. You become your own place where your physical body is in a replication of accessing this magic. And so what this really is it's heaven coming to earth. It's the divine and the human meeting in orbit. And it's all about the root chakra and the crown chakra, you guys. So when the root chakra opens, what it does is it creates an exit point for energy. And this is sort of the last thing I'll say. When the root chakra opens, you guys, it creates an exit point. When the crown chakra opens, it creates an entry point. That's why when you think about people who are in a default mechanism of control, meaning they're in their root chakra, think about someone who's really pragmatic. You guys who are listening, how do they feel energetically? Someone who feels really pragmatic. Think of like a men's coach or teacher who feels really, really of the earth. How do they feel energetically? I'm just curious for anyone watching in the comment section. How do they feel energetically? Someone who's very, very pragmatic, someone who's very, very of the earth, who's in a default mechanism control of the root chakra. How does their energy feel? Well, so how we feel when we're in a default mechanism of control is we're probably going to feel really energetically flat, like there's not a lot of energy, probably going to feel a little bit dense, scary, yeah, probably rigid, probably a little bit in a space of control, probably, and here's an interesting word, really judgmental and untrustworthy. So someone who's in a default mechanism of control with something that feels a little bit outside, they'll probably be judgmental of it, and they'll probably be very untrusting of it, right? And that's why, like, for example, if my energy was around like a dude like that, he might be untrusting of me. He might be kind of like suspicious of me, is kind of how I would associate the energy. And so, right, we're really, really flat. So what that means is there's not energy happening, because if we're in a default mechanism of control in the root, we're going to be flat dead. And think about someone you meet in the spiritual community who is doing all this plant medicine, doing all these things, but is in a bit of spiritual ego. They're probably going to feel really chaotic. They're probably going to be really dysregulated in their nervous system. They're probably going to like have tons of energy, but it's going to be chaotic and swirling. They won't feel calm. They're probably going to be disorganized. They're probably going to be, live in like a realm of like financial scarcity. They're probably going to be very like flowy and like with no structure. You know what I mean? So that's the other end of it. And what that means is there's no exit point and there's no entry point for energy. When we have an exit point and entry point for energy, the process happens. The root is the exit point. The crown is the entry point. The exit point, the root has to open so the process can begin, right? So when the root opens, we're creating an exit point for energy, which means the process can begin. And so now what happens is that the crown accesses energy proportional to the root. So say the root's dealing with the traffic jam. The root's dealing with the traffic jam. We're probably going to be experiencing a lot of like pressure in the head. Energy's holding here. This energy will release once that traffic jam releases in the root. And then this energy will go from here, whoop, down here, stomach, chest, move into our root. We'll try to process it in the root. Hold it, hold it, hold it. And every time that energy processes at the root, our energetic field gets bigger, wider. Our nervous system builds greater capacity. We can hold more energy. More of the higher self vision comes into alchemy and actual vision in front of us. The more we can hold emotional capacity, the more we're actually being able to hold the vibration of what God is truly preparing us for. And the more we're able to move into the expansion of this process. And so that's what's trying to happen, you guys. That's what this new paradigm of spirituality is. It's embodied spiritual initiation. Spirituality is a very physical, cellular, visceral process where it's basically merging and converging every aspect of growth, psychology, and so that's why like people who are really triggered by me are like therapists, counselors, really traditional like men's coaches, people who are really spiritual and like drink the spiritual Kool-Aid. Like think about guys like how triggered those types of people are going to be by my content. Like if you're really of the sky or really, really of the earth, and you're very much one of those ones, you're going to be triggered by me because I'm talking about something that kind of brings. What I'm actually saying in my work is that they're actually, and what I want to say is their work will serve who it's meant to serve, and it's amazing. But this paradigm that I'm talking about is kind of, it's an evolution that's expanded beyond those things. That's expanded higher in consciousness of those things. And so people who are so of the earth are so of the sky, right? Because what I'm talking about is a merging of those two. And that if you're not actually connected to the sky, if you're not connected to the earth, and you're not actually connected to the earth if you're not connected to the sky. That's basically what I'm talking about. And this at a very, very physical level in your body. And I really, really believe that in the next 5 years, there's going to be a lot more people that are coming into this work and that are coming into this process, their bodies realigning to this process, and they're going to need support. And we're going to kind of have to learn a new paradigm of how to teach this. And again, the only one I can really think of, guys, off the top of my head of like who maybe like Joe Dispenza would have been like one of the earliest pioneers of this. But obviously he's talking about it. He comes from like he has a very scientific background, and so he's talking about it from so much of that. And Joe Dispenza was one of the earliest people I was into. I haven't looked at his stuff in a long time, but I'm trying to think of these people who've like physically healed their body and found spiritual enlightenment through physically healing their body. That's basically what we're talking about here. And this is where human consciousness is evolving to. And there's going to be so many more teachers that are coming into this. So many more people that are experiencing these symptoms. Right now, we're in a pressure cooker of all this right now. And the spirit realm and the human realm, there's either no veil, it's been totally disintegrated, or it's very, very thin. And so one thing I'm really wanting to do is to create as many things I can create. And I'm really trying to create a very central community aspect where everyone going through this can be seen, supported, and being able to relate and connect with others that are moving into this physical ascension process. And that's a big thing I'm working on creating in the next 6 months. So keep a lookout for that. But I think that's it for today, everybody. There's a lot of information in this one. I so appreciate you guys who were, Robin, I'm thinking of a very specific popular IG men's work teacher. I can't feel any heart in him. Yeah, it's where it just feels, another one with like men is like all cock and no heart, all heart and no cock. Like when you think of like a masculine embodiment, you want to feel kind of like a real synergy between heart and cock energy. And I think most men sort of have a propensity to lead in one direction more than the other. And a guy who's really like cock energy and no heart's probably going to feel a little bit cold, a little bit like you don't feel emotionally moved by what he's saying. It's like cookie cutter sort of shit, and a guy who's so heart is just going to feel like everything's about love, everything's about connection, everything is about praising the feminine, basically. And that's a lot of just heart connection. But anyways, that's another topic for another day. Much love, everyone. I hope everyone has a great week. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. I got a new video dropping Wednesday, and the next live will be this Friday at the same time. So much love, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for showing up and responding in the comment section. It means a lot. Bye-bye.